Everybody. Adam Scott Bellos, founder and CEO of the Israel Innovation Fund, and he's coming to us live from Ohio, actually, to talk about the coming Jewish collapse and how to prevent it. Adam has written extensively about the failures of Jewish leadership, as we mentioned, a very topical topic, especially this week. And what we found really interesting about Adam, he's not just here to point out the problems, he's here to provide thought out solutions and suggestions for how we can improve and create unity in the Jewish community. So please, Adam Scott Bellos, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. Um, it's extremely humbling to be invited to speak to all of you at the AJA. I saw the list of people that have spoken to your community before, and it's quite extensive and it's quite amazing. And I just want to say, for somebody like myself who has spent the last 18 years of his life trying to prevent what we are now seeing, just to be introduced the way that I was just introduced is extremely humbling because one of the things that uh, I have worked very hard at, and also the people who have helped me build my organization have worked very hard at, is to help provide concrete solutions to the problems that we face. Um, I do not feel that complaining or speaking about these issues is worth speaking about unless there are real possible changes to suggest. Over the last 20 years, we have seen a complete denial of the reality that has been happening down the line. And from what I understand, both in Australia, France, the rest of Europe, England, and North America, not so much South America, are experiencing this crisis of leadership at this time. Um, to me, as a young Jew, and I still consider myself young, I'm only 38. Um, I had noticed when I was in college that people weren't connecting to Israel, that there was a issue, a deep-seated problem that the Jewish professionals of the world were made of the worst types of people in many respects, lazy, entitled, disconnected to Israel, disconnected to Torah, not understanding Zionism. And not only that, not understanding how to give the gift of Israel to the next generation unless it was on their own terms, not that next generation's terms. Um, as many of you know, over the last couple of years, especially the last 2.5 years, there's been a rise of anti-Semitism all over the world and a rise of anti-Jewish expression or Jew hatred. And one of the first things that I remember speaking about when I went on the news on behalf of the state of Israel after October 7th was that they were shouting death to the Jews outside of the Sydney Opera House. Instead of focusing on the cultivation of Jewish identity over the last 20 years, instead of figuring out how do we connect Jews to Israel, instead of asking the hard questions, Jewish professionals and Jewish leadership took the easy way out. And a lot of it has to do with not understanding the fundamentals of Zionism and what Zionism was meant to build, which was the new Jew. We've allowed ourselves to create these sectarian divides that almost could be summed up to being a people that are a religion of organizations. And instead of providing loyalty to the people or to our country or to both the country that we live in and the country that we come from, we were focused on building organizations and organizational loyalty. At the end of the day, the Zionist movement was meant to do one thing: build new Jews, Hebrew speaking, self defending Jews. And without understanding that basic realization, without being able to instill the national ethos of living for the sake of the perpetuation of the nation to which we belong and dying to make way for others who will shape the community and remold it and prevent its stagnation, we got exactly the opposite of that. Because a Hebrew speaking self defending Jew is not a Jew that builds diaspora institutions. They're a Jew that moves to Israel. And the threat of building the new Jew to those diaspora institutions is also in many respects why we are in the situation that we are in. Because a diaspora Jew that becomes a new Jew is never going to donate to those organizations. Post October 7th, we saw something very telling about what it means to be a Jew in the diaspora and what it means to have internalized what has gone on, which is exactly how Jewish organizations and Jewish leaderships reacted to the rise of anti-Semitism. And the worst part about it is that they were shocked by it. If you look at the trajectory of everything from 2020 with COVID, and Michal Cutler-Wunsch used to say this, that the data would show an aggregated, coordination between conspiracy theory against vaccines and anti-Semitism. If you look at what has happened since the year 2000, since Durban, if you look at what has happened since 2006, since the Second Lebanon War, there is only one conclusion that you could come to. If you look at the world from 2008, when Barack Obama got into office and pushed the JCPOA on the American people and pushed a divide and a systematic campaign to divide the Jewish community, there's only one conclusion that you could come to. Anti-Semitism was slowly coming back. We are repeating the 100-year cycle that has happened every 100 years for almost 2,000 years. And that our leadership was not ready to accept that they had failed. And they were not ready to accept the fact that they were misreading the situation over and over and over again. What I talk about in my upcoming book and in a lot of my articles is something called Hebraization, and the need to return to the root of what it is to building new Jews. And what I really breaking down Hebraization is very simple. It's about creating self-defending Hebrew-speaking Jews in the diaspora. It's about creating the modern Makabe that has never existed outside of the land of Israel since the start of Jewish history. Since the start of Jewish history, we have never had a Hebrew-speaking, self-defending diaspora. We've never had Hebrew-speaking, self-defending Jews outside of the land of Israel. So why are we talking about this? What is the issue that everybody is facing? The issue that everybody's facing is that there is a crisis of leadership. There is a betrayal of leadership. There is a betrayal of playing politics for cushy jobs. There is a betrayal of misusing donor funds to no longer provide anything that is result measurable. There is a betrayal to the next generation of the boomers who are leaving behind a legacy of destruction in their path. There is a betrayal of not preparing for the same thing that has happened to us over and over and over again if you understand the basics of our history. At the end of the day, we are looking at a situation that can only be solved by two things: Hebrew and self-defense. And if the third option, if I personally don't like to speak about the third option, but the third option is moving as many Jews as possible, as quickly as possible to Israel, except Israel does not have the financial or the physical infrastructure to be able to handle that type of immigration at this point. And we know that for the first time in the state of Israel's history during COVID, they blocked and stopped immigration. So we know that it's possible. We're living in a place, in a world where Jewish leadership is in a state of denial. I came to visit the Cincinnati JCC here, which also houses the Federation. It is one of the only JCCs in America that has an unlocked door. And when I suggested that they lock it and they put an armed guard at the front of the door just in case, it was considered to be offensive. The first thing that I thought of at being an Israeli and somebody that's lived in Israel for the last 15 years is, oh, I just walked through the door. Any one of these people could get their brains blown out. Our safety and our security and developing the future of of the next generation's identity and providing the tools and resources that are necessary to be able to do that and to refocus the philanthropic dollars in a way to do it intelligently is the most important decisions that we can make over the next I would even say half a year. If you would have asked me a half a year ago, I would say 18 months maybe. But time is starting to tick, and we're starting to notice all over the world the cesspool that our politics have become. I'm less familiar with Australia, but I can tell you that the horseshoe theory is real in America, and the woke right is meeting the woke left very quickly, and the Jews will get caught in the middle. We propose two projects to solve these issues. I call it Project Makabe, and it has two pillars. One is called Shomrei Ha'am. Our goal is to uh, take the trained Krav Maga teachers who have the most advanced training from the army and start sending them to communities to provide subsidized self-defense training through the pipelines of either federations or synagogues, JCCs, or any other community pipeline that exists. Australia is actually a wonderful place for us to pilot our project. I did not realize that there were less than 150,000 Jews in Australia, which I think is amazing. The other side of our coin is what we call the Bat Yehuda Hebrew Nanny Project. I hope you guys think it's kind of funny. The entire point or the entire idea is to bring Hebrew speaking au pairs to fulfill two crucial needs to the Jewish community. One is to provide subsidized childcare, which, if anybody knows, is extremely important in today's world. Childcare is probably one of the most expensive pieces of the puzzle when it comes to raising children, not only in America, also in Israel, also in Australia, also Canada. And with this, we would be able to create a Hebrew speaking environment, an immersed environment to allow the next generation of the Jewish diaspora to be Hebrew speaking. This is the gift and the tool that is necessary to give to the next generation, no matter the cost. And I say this because of one thing. I have studied Hebrew since I was in kindergarten or preschool, even. I have lived in Israel for 15 years. I have served in the army. My Hebrew is nowhere near what it should be. It is one of the hardest things that I struggle with. And so I know if I am who I am and I still struggle with my Hebrew and I hate reading and learning Torah in English because I know the great complexities that come when you study Torah in Hebrew, then I know that others do too. And I want my children and my friends' children and the rest of the children of the nation to which I belong to have the gift and the access to 3,500 years of Jewish tradition. I personally, I want to see that every young Jew is given the gift to be able to access 3,500 years of tradition. I just saw that somebody said what I was saying is absurd. So I'd love to know what I'm saying is absurd. I'd love to know what you think is absurd, and we'll handle it in the questions. But at the end of the day, building the next generation of Jews is going to come down to two things, and fighting corrupt Jewish leadership is going to come down to two things: the Jewish people becoming the new Jews that they're meant to be, so that they are no longer sheep in this culture, that they are their own shepherds, that they can teach their children, like the Shema says, to impress our history and traditions onto them, and to be able to throw a punch when it's necessary. Anti Semitism thrives when Jews become comfortable and when we feel safe. And as Bruce Lee liked to say about self-defense, when you learn self-defense, you don't learn self-defense to fight, you learn self-defense so that you don't have to fight. And I think that's a very important thing to understand of what self-defense can do for an individual in the way they carry themselves. And throughout our history, we were defenseless people, and this is the main lesson that the Jewish community was taught through the Zionist movement. I'm not sure how I'm doing on my time, but I see there's tons of comments in the chat section. I have no problem turning to Q&A, and I can go over what we're doing with our programs. I can expand on a few things, but I really hate pontificating. I love interacting with everybody. So I'm here to answer as many questions if there's a moderator that can answer them, or if we can filter them out or do it in an organized fashion. I'd love to address the person who said what I'm talking about is absurd. For
Maybe if we go to Q&A and maybe another 10 or so minutes. So John
sure.
said that is absurd, but it was a comment. It was relating to someone else's comment,
Oh, I thought
not to your
I
talk.
wanted to know when I wasn't hitting.
No, no,
Um,
it was a
so
reply to a
to comment
reply.
on my recent article, um, I think it's very important to note that we as the Jewish people have a choice as to what leaders we want. And what we have done is become complacent to, especially in North America, to rabbis who care more about their salary and how they look and how they're treated than the way their flock is shepherded. We are afraid of, and maybe this is true for Australia, constantly afraid of the dual loyalty, constantly accusation, constantly worried about fitting in and getting by, not standing out. And instead of standing up for what we believe and fighting for the values that are necessary, we're lying down and taking it. And I have to say, it's extremely disappointing to see what the diaspora's culture has become because it really, at least in America, in many respects, and I say this today, having just left a Jewish business networking event, which took place at a Holocaust um, like exhibit in a museum. We've become Jews who have been reduced to nothing but the faith of our fathers once again, just like Herzl wrote in the Jewish State. And I have to say, even earlier today or yesterday, when I went to this event, I said, "This is a Jewish business event. Why are we talking about dead Jews from 100 years ago? Why are we letting the Holocaust define every single thing about the diaspora's experience? It happened more than 100 years ago. Everybody looked at me like I was nuts." This is also the same community that has an unlocked door at their JCC and thinks nothing bad can happen to them. It happens to be where I grew up is the center of Reform Judaism and had a very large German Jewish community. And we all know that the German Jews waited until the very last minute and were in complete denial of what happened to their country. And it's the same thing that you'll see in America. But if we do not begin to challenge the establishment, if we do not begin to challenge the status quo of Jewish leadership, we aren't learning from Nordau or Herzl or Pinsker or Chada Am or any of the other great men and women that transformed what it means to be a Jew. Because at the end of the day, the Zionist movement was a rebellion against the Jewish establishment and its leadership. And it was a rebellion against the rabbis. And it's very important to note, and I say this with like a very heavy heart. I blame the rabbis. I do. I blame the rabbis for the situation that we're in. Not every rabbi, but I blame the rabbis. Instead of being focused on the spiritual frequency of the world, instead of being focused on connecting their communities to Torah, they were looking for how many people can we keep in the shul? How many people can we keep paying into the dues? Uh, instead of standing up when Mamdani won the primary and immediately saying, you know, this is a problem. Okay, they lived for their cult of rabbi that has been created outside of Israel. They lived for being elite. Okay, and you have to remember in Israel, everybody's a damn rabbi. And guess what? Every rabbi and every civilian wears the same green uniform. Nobody is judged because they have smicha. Nobody is seen as a superhuman Jew because of that. In Israel, we see each other as equals because the green uniform is the great equalizer of our people, which was extremely, extremely important. Without addressing our problems, without admitting our problems, we will not fight this fight. We will lose this fight, and we will lose our communities in the diaspora. And as a Jew who started out on his journey saying that every single Jew needed to move to Israel, and who came around 16 years later, understanding that every Jew moving to Israel is a terrible idea, and that we have to maintain a diaspora in order for our political strength around the world to continue, We must start being honest with the problems that we have. We must start being honest with with the challenges that we face. But most importantly, we have to ask ourselves, what type of diaspora do we want? Will it be weak or strong? And if it is strong, what defines a strong diaspora? And there is only one thing that can actually define a strong diaspora, and that is a Hebrew speaking, self defending one. That should not be controversial. And if that is controversial to you, you don't belong in this community right now. And you don't, especially don't belong in its leadership. Because the only thing that the next 20 years should be focused on are not galas, are not raising money for this cause or honoring this person, which we have a huge problem with. It should not be flying your favorite influencer out. It should not, unless they're Aaron Milan, who's the greatest living non-Jewish advocate of the state of Israel, who I like to call the Carrie Bradshaw of Zionism. Um, but it's the safety and it's the building and it's the structure that is necessary to implement Project Makabe. And I don't say that because it's my idea. I say that because it's the only logical conclusion that we can come to. It is the only logical conclusion that we can come to because 120 years ago, one man, let me correct myself, it wasn't one man. Herzl was not one man. Herzl was a political machine. But 120 years ago, the Zionist movement began, and there was one idea that permeated and succeeded more than anything else, more than just settling the land of Israel, because the idea of what type of state we wanted to build and what type of culture we wanted, and the difference between cultural and political Zionism and the difference of visions, which everybody likes to nitpick because they don't understand the meta idea that Zionism provides for the Jewish people. It's very simple. We had to shed being the Jew of exile, like Herzl wrote, the Jew that became nothing other than the sum of the faith of his fathers. We had to become something new, we had to become something strong, and we had to become something extremely powerful. And in order for us to get back to that, we have to throw off the yoke of the disgusting, corrupted leadership that we have been afraid to face. We have to stand up for the right to demand clear leadership and clear vision. We have to stand up for the fact that our leadership has failed us systematically from the top down and the bottom up all over the world because our safety and security has not been the priority, and the cultivation of our community and the perpetuation of our community has not been the priority of Jewish leaders. Raising money for programs that don't have measurable results and increasing their salaries has been the main goal. The misuse of funds over the last 20 years that I've seen is grotesque. The discouragement of Zionism, of cultivating strong Jewish identities, has been quite large, in my opinion. And if you look at places that are in the diaspora, we have two problems. One is our fear and the anti-Semitism, and the other is assimilation. But if you give the next generation the gift of our civilization through Hebrew and self-defense, and that we take up the idea of Jabotinsky, who said self-defense needs to become as commonplace as lighting our Shabbat candles on Friday nights, you will change the Jewish community. It doesn't take courage to do the right thing. It takes a moral compass that is very easy to point north. And my compass, its north is Jerusalem. And it always has been, and it always will be. And that's the world that I want my children to grow up in, Bizrat Hashem. That's the gift that I want to give the next generation. Because the Zionist movement, if it is about anything, it is about one thing. It is about doing what the pioneers did. It is about doing what Herzl did. It's about doing what Ahad Ha'am did. It's about doing what Begin and Ben Gurion and Golda did. It's about what A.D. Gordon did. It's about sacrificing what you have to build something better for the people that will come after you. It is about creating a world for those who will inherit tomorrow that we can be proud of. Because at the end of the day, I want to leave a Jewish identity and a state of Israel that cannot crumble because of one person or one bad thing or one war or one terror attack or one anti-Semitic attack. I want to leave an identity that is indestructible, that is molded through 3,500 years of strength and fire and trial. That is what I personally want to leave for my children and the people that will come after me in case I'm not lucky enough to have children. Okay, we ready for Q&A?
Adam,
I just
thank
want
you so
everybody to
much.
realize I woke up 10 minutes before this started because I was all prepared for 3 a.m. and so I apologize if you had to wait for me.
I think this is a bright and early, but on fire, as we say. I think, this has been such a topical week for us, but I'd like to know a bit more about your opinions. We talk a lot in Australia about leadership in the Jewish community, and there's a phrase that's used a lot, you do not represent me, or you do not represent me, or this group does not represent the community. But I'd
Yeah,
like to hear
The Jewish community loves that saying.
how do you define in a community who represents who? These elected leaders, it's a little more clear cut if you're talking religion and with a rabbi, but we find that these elected leaders of a Zionist organization or a statewide Jewish community are considering themselves sort of the boss of the wider Jewish community. So when you're cutting out differences in opinion, political views, religious views, what are your thoughts on how do we curb that sort of I'm the representative voice of everyone feeling?
I think I First of all, before I answer the question, I want to say thank you all for having me. I hope um, I spoke well enough given the prestigious list of people that have addressed this group. Um, it's an interesting question that you're asking because it's extremely important. It's extremely important. Let me give you an example. I come home to Cincinnati, Ohio, and I meet with the head of XYZ organization, Federation, JCC, whatever. And when I walk in the door, before I say anything, I'm told there's more to Jewish identity than Hebrew and self-defense. I immediately know that these leaders don't represent me, my opinion, what I think the future of Jewish life should be. Every community has their own issues. Every community has their own representatives that they either like or disagree with. If we're referring to the international institutions and organizations, or are you referring locally?
Let's call this on a local country by country basis.
Listen, I think the Jewish community over the last 100 years has built ridiculous amounts of institutions to create professional leaders. Okay. I am weary of anybody that calls themselves a Jewish professional. And I am weary, please don't laugh at me, but there is usually a similarity that most Jewish professionals have, which is that they've never worked in any other sector or done any other work outside of Jewish professional work. They're usually quite assimilated. Now, this could be different in Australia, and most of the time they tend to be physically unhealthy and not taking care of themselves in a number of ways that not only show self-restraint but self-control, and whether they're male or female. And that is a telling sign of the people that we are getting to lead our communities. And I do not think it is appropriate. There's a reason why I say we have to build. That's why we started building TIIF, the Israel Innovation Fund. We have to build a private Jewish institution. We have to build a private Zionist institution. It's why I joke that we're building the SpaceX to the Jewish world's NASA. I do not believe that there needs to be professional Jews because there would be no need for any of these institutions or federations if our rabbis were doing their job and every single Jew knew self-defense in Hebrew. And when you change, or if you were to radically change our community internationally in that respect, I mean, you don't need a lot of the institutions. I mean, in America, there's like an anti-Semitism organization for one in every 20 Jews or something like that. There are, you make the joke in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I grew up, in a 1 block radius, there are 5 Reform synagogues. It makes zero sense because nobody goes to any of them. We are wanting to hold on to an infrastructure that was built for the 20th century that does not meet the needs of 21st century Jewish civilization. It just doesn't. And I am tired of having to kowtow or dance around Jewish leadership that doesn't represent me. And I don't believe that they need. I mean, I remember when I was on Facebook, and I'm very rarely on Facebook these days because Instagram has taken over so many things, or popularity, I guess you could say. I remember when the president of the Federation of Sarasota, Florida, flew to Israel after October 7th, and he took a picture of himself walking down when you get to Ben Gurion Airport, you go to the plane or you come out the plane, you go down that long walkway, and he had his big bag on his shoulder, and he was like, I'm going to help. And I'm thinking to myself, am I allowed to say the F word? This is Australia. You guys say the F word all the time. I'm just thinking to myself, what the heck are you doing? What are you going to do? We're in the middle of fighting a war. You are not going to do anything. You're taking a photo op for looking good while we're in trouble. This is our war. You've chosen to not. I mean, this person ended up, one of their kids did go to the army, but when you can always tell who you need to get rid of if they use these opportunities to self-promote or to actually defend the state of Israel. And it was something that happened post October 7th, which is that you had the emergence of these opportunists who had zero careers or their careers were in trouble, and they used the suffering of Israel to promote themselves. And I've written a lot about this. I'm sure some of you read my article, A Birkin Bag Doesn't Build a Nation. I also, right before this last article, in an article called You Can't Influence Your Way Out of Anti-Semitism, which is a commentary on what Jewish organizations and institutions have built, and my criticism of it. I think I have no idea if you're asking a specific question about your community in general, but here's what I'll say. Get rid of the leaders that you don't like that are leading you into the abyss of failure. Because no matter what anybody says, the Jewish community leaders in Australia have failed. Because look at Australia right now. Look at the anti-Semitism right now. Look at what they have failed to prevent. Look at what they have denied. The second the first firebomb happened, immediately self-defense should have been brought to the community. Immediately. There is no, it's actually very funny. I never thought Australia would be the first Anglo country to go. I always thought it would be the last. I always thought it would go England, America, Australia. Instead, it's going to go Australia, England, America. So your community has two choices: to stand up and fight or to lie down, and you will know right away what leaders to keep and who to get rid of. Because the ones who will say to stand up and fight are the ones who live in the spirit of the early Zionists, because they were the ones who understood they had to stand up and fight just to live. I
Yeah,
hope that answered your
Thank you,
question.
Adam.
definitely did. And on that point, someone raised with me, they said in Israel, a lot of people say there needs to be an inquiry because, Bibi and different people were in charge on October 7, whereas in the diaspora, the same people who oversaw the largest surge of anti-Semitism in history, in Australian history, the lowest point of the Australia-Israel relationship, all the same communal leaders, this person made that point to me, are still in the same positions, and there hasn't been any inquiry, and they're just continuing on the same strategies. I thought it was an interesting
You,
point.
you, you see the same thing in America as well. You see the same thing with the ADL, the federations. We did a project. One of our main flagship projects is called Wine on the Vine. It's what we started, which is planting grapevines in Israel and planting whole vineyards in Israel. At some point, we'd love to have this community plant a vineyard to have that legacy. But when we brought our idea that we did in Israel, which was making the bottles with the Chatufim and their families picking the bottle and telling the story. And really, it was something that we would execute for these families. The head of the Jewish Federation in North America, okay, and the head of JFNA said, we're not comfortable with this. And I go, what makes you uncomfortable? Let's get Shelley Shem Tov on the phone. Let's get Edith Ohel on the phone. I go, why don't you tell them what makes you uncomfortable? The boomers have destroyed Jewish identity for the diaspora. Okay, they are not wartime consiglieres. If any of you have ever seen The Godfather, okay, they are not the people that can lead us into the charge at all. They are peacekeepers. They are the Jedi before the rise of the Sith, in total denial. And if you look at just how Jonathan Greenblatt in America has been able to stay in power, who has utterly failed, if you look at the Federation leaders, if you look at FIDF or any other major Jewish institution that is throwing gala after gala, okay, it is just not appropriate right now. There is only one thing. If you look at the organizations who have created a pay-to-play situation where 24-year-olds are being awarded awards for fighting anti-Semitism without any results because they're paying for it, because they have some type of narcissistic personality disorder and a need for attention because they don't know how to do anything. And this comes back to what I said about Jewish professionals. There is one job that every Jewish leader has to do right now. It is get a gun in their community members' hands. Make sure that every person knows how to use that weapon or gun. I don't know what the laws are in Australia. Every single Jewish community leader, every rabbi of a large congregation or small congregation has one responsibility right now. It is to make sure that your community can self-defend. It is to make sure that the young children of your community especially have the confidence to help defend their families. It is the only other responsibility that I can think of at this time is to make sure that after they know how to take care of themselves and protect themselves, that they can connect to their tradition and their history. Being Jewish in the 21st century is not the same as being Jewish in the 20th. It is a completely different narrative. It is a completely different reality that the millennial generation and Gen X and Gen Z has inherited. And unfortunately, because we have failed the millennials and Gen X, Gen Z is a delusional, at least in America, a delusional conspiratorial generation. I hope I answered your question.
Thanks, Adam. We'll go to our Q&A with the audience. Alan, if you'd like to unmute, please.
Thanks, Tennille. And Adam, thank you for getting up so early in the morning for us.
I appreciate it. I hope to God you guys were not waiting long for me, so I apologize if there was any delay.
That's okay. I've got a couple of aspects to my question, and they do touch on what you're talking about. In Australia, we have a leadership that, in my opinion, is too close to the government of the day. And these leaders end up representing the community in their own political image, so to speak. The problem we have is that not enough people want to get involved in communal leadership. This is a big problem, and I'm not quite sure how we go about addressing this.
So you're saying that there's a problem with getting people involved in Jewish communal leadership, the only way that you get people involved in Jewish communal leadership is if they have the itch to do something for their people. But the only way to change that or increase that is to build the type of Jews that feel that way. Why am I talking about Hebrew and self-defense so much? Because it's the basic building blocks. It's the DNA of the Jew. And what we have tried to do over the last 2, 3, 4 decades is put Band-Aids on the problem that exists amongst non-Orthodox Jews. And I don't think that Orthodox Jews are immune to this problem. I think they're just as susceptible to this experience. It just maybe doesn't happen as much, or it's easier to lay it on non-Orthodox Jews. I want to cure the cancer. I want to go in, I want to freeze it, I want to shatter the tumor and remove it. That is the tumor, that is the cancer of assimilation. without doing that, you can't do what you're talking about, which is trying to get more people involved. You can't force a feeling. You can't change somebody to be something they're not unless there's a experience like October 7th, which has created the October 8th Jews, which I have a huge problem with because many of them think they know way too much for their own good. Why am I talking about Project Maccabee? Why has Project Maccabee become why am I talking about Hebraization through Project Maccabee? Why am I talking about Hebraization in general? It's because we have to build modern Hebrews that are going to understand and love the nation the way they love themselves. And in my opinion, humbly speaking, I'm not the Messiah and I'm not a genius. Okay. But in my humble opinion, if we want to create the Jewish community that we want to see, we have to start at the beginning. We have to get them while they're young. We have to give them, listen, we have to give them the gift of 3,500 years of history. Okay. I'm a very unique case. Okay. When I was in preschool, I would not leave preschool until my mother brought me into the children's sanctuary and we opened the ark and I got to kiss the Torah every day. Okay. It is, I still remember doing it when I was 3 years old. It's my earliest memory. For some reason, this is how I have just been viscerally my entire life. Okay. Not everybody is like that because they don't have either. If you don't have that visceral connection to being a Jew or to the land of Israel, you have to give people the tools to be able to create that for themselves. And being a strong Hebrew speaking Jew, I believe, is where that begins. And everything begins at the home. And if we can't remember the basic tools that are necessary to build a Zionist, the way the Zionist movement laid it out over 100 years ago, we are doomed to fail and not succeed in the problem that they succeeded in solving, which was changing a collective consciousness of a generation globally. It's very, very important to understand, what did the early Zionist leaders succeed in? They succeeded in saving, because you have to remember, the Zionist movement in the beginning was the minority of the Jewish people. They succeeded in changing the community. They succeeded in rebuilding the community. They succeeded in preventing its stagnation. And they succeeded in the revolution of what it would become to be a new Jew, because they created new links in the chain of our peoples and perishability that were unbreakable. And I think, I always like to say, right now is our Rocky IV moment. Right now is our wax on moment. It's back to basics. It's back to the very basic things that make us all Jews. It means understanding our story, knowing our language, and knowing how to defend and protect it. It's to be that ancient people that the desert people feared when we were going through the Exodus.
Adam, just if I can touch on my second point, I came across a podcast from the Begin Center featuring a guy called Benjamin Kirstein.
I
And
know, Ben. Yeah.
okay, and it
He wrote
was
a book called
fascinating. He says that the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora communities, suffer from a quote learned helplessness and need to be stronger in standing up by causing what he calls good trouble. And this sounds like the sort of thing you might be advocating. Are you suggesting that we cause a bit more disturbance within the community, perhaps by being less politically correct?
I do not believe in causing good trouble outside of our community. I don't, let me put it this way. I am not purporting to build a new JDL where we go out and beat the crap out of anti-Semites. I'm saying that we need to build young Jews who anti-Semites are afraid to touch. And there's a very big difference with that. I'm not saying, I am saying remove Jewish leadership and replace it with something new, or allow Jewish leadership to understand they've wronged their ways and create or allow our organization to globally use the pipelines that are necessary to give people what they want, which is what we're talking about tonight. The only way we will win this fight is by doing two things: implementing both sides of Project Maccabee, Hebrew and self-defense, but building those young Jews through that program that emanate a strength that cannot be denied. And that is what I would how I would answer that. Ben and I've known Ben for many years since I moved to Israel. Almost, I think I was introduced to Ben. I've been in Israel for 15 years, so I think I've known Ben for 9, more than half of the time that I've been there. He's a brilliant writer. We share a Zionism that is extremely similar, an ideology that is probably extremely similar. I was very happy to see that he wrote the book. I don't see it getting the dues that it probably deserves, but I do not believe in causing trouble. I did that in my 20s. And there's a time and a place for yelling and screaming and acting like, I'm sure some of you are aware of, Lizzie Savetsky, who has, for some reason, become someone who tries to report herself as some type of Queen Esther. But she takes videos of herself screaming and yelling at anti-Semites in the streets. And advocacy is about using your tongue to disarm somebody. Okay. You don't need to scream and yell like a nut job if you have the education and if you have the physical presence to be able to hold yourself. So I do not. Now, that being said, if there was a situation like there was in Australia a few months ago where the violence was unhinged, you create a community shmirah, you create the projects that are necessary to show that you're defensible. A good offense is a great defense, because you can't have a good defense if you don't have a good offense in general. And I just saw that somebody said, I would like to know what was just said. Somebody just said, we will not win this fight. History tells us that Israel is the only fight we need to win. I disagree with you. There is no guarantee that we keep Israel. There's no guarantee that the Third Commonwealth is the final Commonwealth. Okay? Our hubris is what led us to the golden calf. Our hubris is what led us to not release our slaves. Our hubris is what led us to cooking our own children during the destruction of the Second Temple. The second we take our eye off the ball everywhere is when we lose, because we have to become strong Jews in the diaspora to defend Israel, because Israel is needed to defend the diaspora, and Israel has to take the lead in implementing what I'm talking about in many respects. But at the same time, the diaspora communities have to take responsibility for themselves, and you have to take responsibility for your leadership, and you must replace leaders who will prevent this transition. Period. End of story. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you,
Yes.
Adam. We are just about out of time for tonight, and we do thank everyone for staying a bit longer than usual. So before we wrap up, finally, please tell our supporters, everyone online, more about the Israel Innovation Fund, how they can get involved, how they can sign up to the newsletter, support, and be a partner in this.
Sure. First, I would love to say I have never been to Australia, so I would love to come to Australia. Well, I'm visiting my parents right now, and my mother said to me, "All I want to do is go and visit Australia before I die." And I hate it when my mother talks like that, because she's only 71, so she's not that old. First, I just want to say, before supporting me, I would love to figure out a way to come and visit and understand the community in a much deeper way, and figure out a way that I can support all of you, and how we can bring Project Makabe to Australia, because it is a perfect ground for 2 cities to have our test pilot. I mean, the whole country is a test pilot for this, given the size and the connection of the community itself. And our test pilots are written for Arizona and Florida and I believe Indiana, and then we're having requests to do Paris and London. But what really blew my mind after I connected with the AJA was I didn't realize how small the entire Jewish community in Australia actually is, which made me say to myself, "Oh my God, we could make the pilot in this country and show what could be done with an entire community." So I just want to say, In the next 6 months, I would love to connect with as many of you as possible. In the next 3 months, I would love to get out there. My birthday is in March. I would love to be there for my birthday. And one of my closest friends, who is the Deputy Foreign Minister, Sharon Eskel, speaks so highly of her time in Australia and of the Australian people. And at camp growing up, our Australian counselors were always the most fun. So I know that about Australians, and I know that about your community, that it's an amazing one. You can support TIF by going to TIIF.org. You can sign up for our listserv there. We have a number of different ways that you can support us. You can plant a vine with us for $18 in Israel and choose a winery. We have an option for people to plant a vineyard, which is $36,000. We usually reserve that for high-level donors, large communities, synagogues, organizations, and in return, you receive 1,000 bottles of wine over the course of 4 years. Sometimes it's 800, depending on the winery and the quality of the wine. And then we have a website where you can buy Israeli wine, which is called wineonthevine.com. Our Plant a Vine site is called plantavine.org. One of the things that I desperately would like to figure out is who we can coordinate and partner with in Australia to start bringing Israeli wine to Australia. Talking about the economy and the agricultural economy is a completely different topic that my organization is very passionate about, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, but that was not our topic of discussion for today. And you can follow me on Instagram, which is Adam Scott Bellos. But I would, if it's okay with you guys, I would very much love to answer any more questions that are here if anybody is willing to stay on and ask them. I feel terrible about being late, and I'd like to make sure that everybody gets any question they have answered, if that's okay.
Adam, you have certainly made up time, and we thank you so much for your time. I think instead of keeping you on, we'll let you go back to sleep today and back to bed. But the questions that our community does have for you, I think are best placed to be answered in person when you're in Australia.
Listen, I would love to come, and if anybody would like to reach out to me to help me figure out how to get there, that would be absolutely wonderful. I would be very humbled to come and visit the community. And honestly, I think bringing our project as a test pilot is an important thing. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to address your community.
Adam, thank you for your strong, undeniable leadership, for trying to make our community strong, healthy, and proud. The only thing that we can really hope for as a Jewish community is that we're united, that we are proud Jews, and that we are Zionists, we have love and support for our homeland. And that's at AJ. Really, all that we ask of all our supporters and followers is that they have love and support for Israel and pride in their Judaism. So it's wonderful to have somebody like you who's out there on the front line fighting for us, fighting for justice, fighting for unity. We would love to visit you when our HA tour is over in Israel in the end of June. And Robert and I and our AJ team will be working behind the scenes because we'd absolutely love to see you in Australia too.
Yes, I would love that. And thank you for acknowledging the importance of what we're doing. I am persona non grata amongst Jewish leadership these days, and I wear that badge with great pride. So thank you for having me and having the courage to listen to me. So
Thank you,
thank you,
everybody.
thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, and we will see you all next week. This has been recorded. It'll be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow, also replayed on J Air Radio. So give that a listen while you're in the car or at work and share with your family and friends. Thank you so much for all our supporters for joining us this evening, for listening to us during the delay, and for our wonderful speaker tonight, Adam Scott Bellos. Thank you, everybody, and good evening.